The Alberta leader of the Canadian Taxpayer Federation come before the Heritage Committee, and the Liberal round MP Coteau tried to trick her into admitting something that wasn't true. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. As this is an episode of Versus, I'm just going to let it play. I might have cut 10 seconds out of the whole thing, either on the very front or on the very back, nothing taken out of the middle.
I'll start off with Miss Sims and Mr. Thorpe. Thank you for being here. I guess the first question I would ask, and I just wanted to acknowledge that I think many Canadians do agree with you that the bonuses were unacceptable, so I acknowledge that. We had a conversation in this room, and it was very clear that especially considering the economic situation our country is, the challenges that Canadians are facing, it's something that, and I said, did not sit well with Canadians. So I agree with that. I want to talk about the CBC as a concept, though. You know, back in 1936, when the Conservatives established the CBC, it was there to bring the country together, to connect the country. If you removed the dollar amount and you removed the bonuses, do you agree with the concept of CBC?
It's still a conflict of interest, and I say this more not from a taxpayer's perspective, even though we wouldn't want to spend money on a media company. We don't want to spend money on companies anyway. No corporate welfare. We don't care what they're producing. But as a journalist, a longtime journalist, it is just a fundamental conflict of interest for a journalist to be paid by the government. It doesn't matter if it's a conservative government or an NDP government or a left-leaning or right-leaning journalist. It is just fundamentally a conflict of interest for the media to be funded by the government.
No. I take that point. Now, CBC is more than just a television broadcaster. It's more than just a deliverer of news. It does a lot more than that. For example, children's programming. Election coverage in our country, the Olympics, radio. This morning I woke up and I always open up my app, the CBC Listen app, and I listen to the morning news, but I also listen to the world news. That's how I, receive my news. I don't think I've turned on CBC, the channel, for a long time. It's usually direct through YouTube or directly through the website, through the GEM app. The statistics you gave, and I think Ms. Tate actually acknowledged this, that the viewership on television was dropping. But when you start to look at the actual online presence, like, for example, on election night, there were 9 million impression rates on the website. So we're seeing a huge jump in online listening through radio, through YouTube, through the GEM app. So I think it would be fair to say that there may not be growth on television, which is across all broadcasters, we've seen a decline. But would you acknowledge that when it comes to its online presence, the numbers are actually increasing drastically?
So there's a few things there. Mm-hmm. One, again, we're opposed to government-funded media, period. Two, when it comes to ratings, I found it really interesting that Ms. Tate and others at the CBC don't want to give us their subscriber numbers, not names or anything like that, that would be crazy, but their subscriber numbers to GEM. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, nearly nobody's watching you on TV. Oh, trust us, we're picking it up with GEM. Okay, how many people have got on GEM? Sorry, I can't tell you that. Right. It's really odd. And so that's the main element, is that we don't want government funding media, and that the ratings, right, we don't actually have them for GEM or online.
But the other ratings are out there. Like, it's very clear. Like, if I just went into Chat GPT and put in what are the ratings for listenership, also for online viewing, the numbers come up they're very new. Like, the fact that I said 9 million people tuned in online during election day says a lot. There's a lot of information there. Do you agree with for example, the wage subsidy and also just the media support for example, Postmedia has got tens of millions of dollars. So you disagree with any media. It doesn't matter if it's community-based, a small community newspaper.
Journalists shouldn't be paid by the government.
So period. You would even disagree that a small community broadcaster that is not-for-profit, that's servicing a community by maybe providing information into a remote community on an emergency, things like that, local news. You wouldn't support government supporting any of that at all?
The government should not pay media companies, period. And then if you start getting into things like, oh, well, what about Indigenous programming? The CBC spends a fraction of a percentage point on their Indigenous programming.
Right.
So they pay their executive bonuses more.
How do we deliver media, or I would say news? Because there's a difference sometimes between what a journalist may put on just general broadcasting for information, the weather, for example. How would you propose getting that? Canada's such a large country. How would you propose getting that information out there to all Canadians that maybe don't have access to the internet because of where they are, and they would have access to radio? How would you propose that people get that information?
Like an emergency basis?
Just on a regular basis, community information.
So
do you think government should be supporting getting information out to rural, small communities that normally wouldn't have enough capacity through a business approach to support a local media agency?
So again, we're talking about the behemoth that is the CBC.
No, I'm
$1.4 billion. And just to be clear, you're whittling it down to this tiny little keyhole of getting emergency information to people in the north?
You said you just disagree with all support to media.
Sorry, Chair.
The time is up, Mr. Coteau.
Ironically, MP Coteau displays exactly why we shouldn't be having governments interfere with the media. He will split hairs and turn a small fact and try to turn it into something else. For example, 9 million people on election night in the United States. Well, when I was looking for the numbers, Google wouldn't show me anybody but CBC or CTV. There was no other option. So because of Bill C-18, they limit my access to places where I would be able to get it. So if you're doing that and then you're telling me that all of a sudden 9 million people, but you're forcing them to go there, which they will stop going to because you lose your mind and you try to take the story and make it all about your politics, which is a problem. CBC had the local news and they destroyed it all. They packed it all up to try to tell themselves that we're going to just concentrate fully and completely on the world news. As MP Coteau says, he gets up in the morning and he listens to his, which I don't believe for 1 second, but what he doesn't seem to understand is he kind of puts his own foot in his mouth because he says, well, I listen to the CBC World News. And then he tries to convince you that it's all about the local news. Sorry, but the local news is only going to be covered by the local people. And honestly, you could drop a radio tower in and give the local news guy, and they could work it out at City Hall. I'm sure we could do it for way less than $1.4 billion. But they, of course, that would bother the government, especially the Liberal government, because they're relying on that to try and trick you into thinking the way that they believe. They want to brainwash you. That's their only way of staying in power, is to make you think something that isn't true, such as 9 million impressions on election night. What he leaves out is that the internet, Google, wasn't letting you look anywhere else. You had to work for it a little bit to find something else. All right. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I'll talk to you next time.